you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was good. And so we're just going to move forward. And I did tell him, I said, I need the paperwork to confirm the owners, the actual owners. So he sent me that. I just haven't opened it up. It's in my email. So.
Okay. Well, you know how it is. You need any help, you know.
Thank you.
And
I may need some.
that's okay. I'm sure you will. That's just the nature of the game.
Right. But I'm excited because we I lightly
Well,
said,
that's just be prepared, you know, just try to get it listed right. Hopefully that they've gone and they've, you know, cleaned out stuff and they've.
oh goodness, yeah, it's empty, and we actually lightly staged it. We went in and redid, you know, floors. I had them do several things to update the house, and it looks farming right now.
Important is curb appeal. Make sure all.
Oh yeah, I did that too.
The yard's done, pine straw, all that stuff.
Yes, sir.
That thing ought to sell like a hot cake.
Well, I hope so, but it may not, because the brother wants high dollars, as much as he can get.
Well, that's one of those things, when you talk to people from perspective, you got to step out of this was your mama's house. You have ownership, privacy fence yourself. You sanded the floors. You get out of this, and this is a dollars and cents. What is reasonable? You can't go and expect somebody to pay way more money than this thing is worth, you know. So
yeah,
you got to speak to them in that fashion. And when you have somebody like that that's stubborn and so forth,
oh yeah,
it's better to talk to them up front and just say, you know, if you are out of the box and unreasonable about your expectations, and let's hypothetically say somebody offered you that amount of money, there's got to be an appraisal. When the appraisal is done,
yep,
and it's going to knock everything down, and you may make yourself in a poor position than you started. So,
well, my best friend's husband wants to go ahead and get the appraisal done before we actually list, so that he has a good
that
idea.
is always an excellent idea. That gives you, and when I speak to somebody that way, when it's kind of vague on where the property stands, that's a cookie cutter neighborhood, so it shouldn't be too hard getting comps on it. But if you get an appraisal, when you're talking to them, you can say, we don't want to ask too much and not get an offer, or get it overpriced and it not appraised.
That's how he feels. Yeah.
And we don't want to leave money on the table either. So let's get somebody that's their job, is to appraise property.
Right. I told him, I said, we have to use someone local, and they have to go in the house and look around. We're not going to use somebody that doesn't know the area. And we definitely need them willing to go in the house and look around, because we've done so much.
Yeah. If you need an appraiser, our ARC uses him a lot. And his name is Rick Lawrence. He has property all over. He does a lot for our office, because we have so much property that's not cookie cutter, that has acreage with it and so forth. And so that's situations where you got to get in there and get a price on it, because you can be way off in some instances.
Does he know Prattville pretty well?
He actually lives in Clanton, and he does appraisals all over. He's probably done, you know, not with a contract, just, hey, I need a value on this property. I bet you he's done 75 or 80 for me alone over the years, but he does a lot for.
Oh, wow.
So he's done everything from Wetumpka to Montgomery to Lake Martin. I've, you know, had some in Coosa County, just different places. He's very good. Everybody, hey, this morning we're going to wait just a few more minutes in case we got some stragglers coming here. Miss Brown, are you okay today? You got to unmute if you're going to talk. Good
morning.
To me. Yeah. Okay.
Good morning.
How's my Lily? Is she okay?
She's doing good. She's at school, and they have a field trip to the courthouse today for Law Day.
Oh my goodness. Morning,
so,
Hey, baby, come here. I need a blanket for their cage.
Brandon, we got stuff going on in a cage in your house. I told you can't put children in a cage anymore.
Oh, okay. You know, you beat that so you won't hear all the rescues going on. So.
Brandon's all fired up. We're gonna help him write his first contract in a house over in Old Cloverdale today. So this will be a good class for you, Brandon, doing this contract class. Okay, we're gonna wait till 9:05. We got 2 more minutes. We're gonna wait for anybody else that may be coming in. I hope everybody's got a great weekend planned. The weather is so nice. It's not even believable.
I wish there were some activities at pumpkin patches this weekend, but they're not open yet.
I'm sure. I mean, we have been so cooped up for such a long time with rain. I mean, it'd rain. It'd be okay a day or two, and then rain. And with the weather pushed out and no chance of rain and blue skies and highs in the low to mid 70s, you can't beat that with a stick. Football weather, it's Friday and Saturday weekend. Everybody's back into that. I've been excited watching ball games and looking and seeing full stands out there. So that's been nice. Okay. Good morning, Daylene. Okay.
Good morning. I'm here.
and then there's Nancy and Scott. Or is that just Nancy or just Scott? Okay. We're going to get started. All right. Today we are doing contract, and I'll give you some explanations, and this is going to take a while because I'm going to go over every single line of our 7-page contract on what it means, all the blanks, to give you an idea and give you some insight on when you are going over these offers, what you can give your customer as an explanation of this is what you're signing and this is what it means. Okay. We aren't attorneys. We aren't interpreting or anything like that. We're just saying, this is it. This is a contract that all of the companies in our association uses. Some of them have made modifications to their own contract, which I recommend don't use those. When they start changing things, it makes it different than what we're used to and what we use, and it benefits them and their company and not necessarily the seller or the purchaser. This contract, and since the beginning, we changed periodically to accommodate the times of what makes sense, and it is done by the association and the association attorneys. And it's designed not to be heavily favoring the seller or the buyer. It's designed to facilitate the contract and make it fair. Okay, now, if each one of you will email me, I will do a return email and I will send you what we are using today. And what we will be using today is, I have made a contract with every single blank of the contract has a number, okay? And I have a sheet that I've printed out and looking at, which I will use, it has 39 definitions basically that associate with each one of these numbers and will tell you what it means. If you email me, I'll send you back this and I'll send you back the definitions where you can save it and go over it whenever you want to. And of course, if you want to go back as a refresher, we are recording our classes and you can go back and do that. Okay, so is everybody ready? Is everybody ready? Okay, you're nodding your head. Okay, we're going to start with page one. Hello? Okay. With page one of the contract. Starting back, obviously, with number one, you want to put the MLS number in this. It really aggravates me when I get contracts that aren't complete. They leave out things like zip codes and full names and things like that, which is being a poor agent. Do it right, and that way it makes your transaction smoother. The people that need to read it are the attorneys, the other agents, the customers and then clients that are using the contract. They can see what's going on. Okay, I always recommend do these on a computer, fill it in. Those of you that are filling in the blank, unless you're doing something on the fly where you're writing the contract on the hood of your car because you need to do it right there. First of all, it doesn't look good. If you're trying to read my writing on a contract, you're going to need an interpreter because it's, a lot of times it's just not very legible. Okay. So number one, our MLS number that we're going to put in there. If it is not an MLS, if it's a for sale by owner, put the initials for sale by owner, not listed. Okay. And that way we'll know that somebody doesn't need to be searching for the information in MLS. Okay. Number two is the subject property address. You've got 2 lines to do this. So make sure you put in the full address. Sometimes I put in additional information like 123 Redland Road and put in parentheses home and approximately 14 acres. Okay, so you know what you're buying here. Okay, you want to put in the city that the property is located. You want to put in the zip code, the county, and here's your legal description. I put in 2 things for the legal description. I look in Real List or I look in the tax information. That's one of the first things that you need to do when you're writing a contract is pull up Real List and pull up all the information. It's going to give the owners of record. It's going to get a lot of data that would be helpful when you are writing an offer. So I'm going to put in the parcel ID number. It's about a 14-digit number. I'm going to put it in, and then I'm going to put the legal description. If I'm writing this in, hopefully that I'm making an offer on is already in MLS, and hopefully the listing agent did a good job and already put this information in, and it will populate when you are doing an Instinet form and populate information. Doesn't matter if it's been populated or not. Double check. People make errors all the time when they're putting in numbers and so forth. So number 6 is where you have what is this from a legal description name, not a better known as property address. Property address is never a legal description. Okay, legal description goes here. All right, now, buyers and sellers. You usually have 2 on both accounts. So you need to make sure that, again, before you start, you need to find out certain things about the buyers and sellers. And who you represent, you definitely need all the information. The other side, but just basically a full name. And that's, I don't know why agents do it when they're doing a listing and they'll just put a last name or something like that. You need an accurate full name when you're doing an offer. So first name, first name, middle initial, last name on your buyers, first name, last name, middle initial on your sellers. If you're writing a contract on a listing and you have the information in there is just a last name, again, pull up Real List. At the very top, it's going to have the accurate owner of record name. Now, it's always good. I just did it on a contract I did yesterday. The agent only put the last name and I called, and the tax records only showed one owner in it, but the listing agent said there's two owners and she gave me their accurate name. So it's always put a little extra time in doing the documentation of whatever you do correct, so you don't have to go back and undo it again, particularly for these contracts, because if you don't have the names correct, if you're missing someone, if it is an estate or a power of attorney, you wouldn't need to know what the correct name is. Okay, questions so far? Okay, moving on along. Purchase price. That's pretty self-evident. What is the purchaser going to offer? You can save a lot of time when you do this, when you're writing an offer for someone. If you got a property and it's 200,000 and they want to offer 150. Okay. A lot of time that needs to be spent in schooling your purchaser or your seller prior to contract, prior to listings and so forth is going to be time saved and probably help the person you're representing do a better job in negotiating, because when you start throwing ridiculous things out there, much of the time it backfires. Okay, for instance, you got a $200,000 house and they're going to offer $150,000. I tell them it's my job to represent you and offer what you want to. But my experience is if you're lowballing and fishing for them to come back with a counter just to see how low they'll come, much of the time they're just going to ignore it and say no thank you because you're too far apart. That's actually what I recommend my sellers most of the time when they get an offer that's just ridiculous. I tell them that we need to go back to the people and say, we appreciate your offer, but we are too far apart, so we're not even going to counter. Okay. And that kind of gets the purchaser to a more realistic type situation. We know if they're serious or they're not. If you're thousands and thousands of dollars apart, if you got something that you can see that's pretty much fair market value and somebody's coming in with a low offer, you need to let them know that it's probably going to backfire against you, and you probably do a better job of getting a good deal by being something more realistic and close to the asking price. Okay, earnest money. Earnest money is the purchaser's money credited toward their money that they will owe at closing. A lot of time that's not understand. They think that's extra money somewhere. They need to have it explained. If you owe $1,000 at closing is your part of what is owed, and you have a $500 earnest money, that means you've already paid $500 and you only have $500 at closing. Okay, so earnest money is by tradition mostly, and it's something that a lot of places are moving toward not using earnest money at all, because earnest money is only as good as if there's a dispute over it, who's willing to go to court. Okay, so your earnest money, good faith money, binder money, all of those things, it's commonly known as. Typically, the earnest money check is written to the listing company, and they hold that in their trust account, and it's credited toward the purchaser's proceeds at closing. A lot of the time now, which I actually prefer, because I really don't want to fool with checks. I don't want to do anything except get a copy of one to put in our paperless pipeline for our records. A lot of people now are writing the earnest money check directly to the closing attorney. So if the closing attorney that's been selected, which is by right of the purchaser, is going to be Gary McAnally, then they can make the check to Gary McAnally, and they'll already have the funds and they can disperse it correctly. Questions so far? Okay. These blanks here regarding check, if applicable, for the earnest money, it is in regard to having that money held by the listing broker. These blanks here is who is going to hold the money. Okay, who is going to hold the money? Very important blank, and we've had this thing accidentally left out sometimes. They forget, and this number 11, and that is how much the seller is willing to contribute toward this transaction. It used to, in the olden days, be split up into closing costs and discount and attorney fees, and they used to split it all up. And now, to make it easier for everyone, it's just one lump number, and you can see it applies to closing costs, which it says settlement cost, and prepaids. Okay, what is a prepaid? A prepaid is necessary money that the purchaser has to have in order to close the deal. Prepaids are, there's a certain amount of money that they're going to need to collect for prepaid tax, for prepaid interest, for hazard insurance. All of those things are considered to be prepaids, and the seller is allowed to pay a portion or all of those, but never put in a percentage. Just people don't do that anymore, and that's all that used to be done back in the old days. Seller agrees to pay 3% or 6% or whatever. We need a number. Okay, so if you're representing the purchaser, you need to already have an idea of what that number is, because you have spoken to the mortgage company. You've asked the mortgage company before you've even started writing this. Hey, I need a good faith estimate, and I need a good faith estimate for a $200,000 sale. And then you can see what the estimate for the closing and prepaids is going to be, and then you can ask whatever portion of what the mortgage company says it's going to be to help your purchaser. Okay, questions about number 11? Okay, moving on. Number 12 is the amount, and sometimes that can be left blank. If you've got a good faith estimate and it has a number, that's fine. Closing costs are based upon the loan amount. So if you've got a $200,000 sale and somebody's going to put down $100,000, that gives the people on the other side an idea that there's less expense involved, because the amount of the loan is going to be, not just the minimum amount down and then finance the balance. So you can leave that blank, because sometimes those things change. When the person goes into the mortgage company and they start looking at their financing and the suggestions through the mortgage company, they may come up with a different number. So, but you definitely want to let them know the amount financed if possible, and what kind of loan is it going to be. These days, and it's not supposed to be, but the reality of it, it usually is. VA appraisals and VA loans are a little different and a little tougher. So you're going to click here, whether it's a VA, FHA, conventional, or in this blank, if it is another type of program. I just did one yesterday that is a step up program, which is basically 100% financing, and the payment escalates marginally, in the next few years and so forth. You can do that. USDA loan, bank financing. You're just going to put in here if it's something other than these three. Okay. Questions? Okay. If this is a cash sale, if you're ever representing somebody with cash, that is great, but you need to prepare them in advance. When we make an offer, we're going to need a letter from wherever you're holding that money. Sometimes it's in a bank, sometimes it's in a money market, sometimes it's in stocks or whatever, but whoever it's from and whoever is representing that purchaser that's holding those funds can very easily email on their letterhead, Mr. and Ms. Jones has sufficient funds in their account to pay cash for a $200,000 purchase. And that's really all that's needed. Okay. So that's what's going to happen here. Okay. We have completed page 1. Questions? I do this so well. It just is just so understandable to everybody, right? Okay. Moving on along. Okay. Closing to be on or about. All right. I practically never, unless I'm absolutely forced to, make a closing on the last couple of days of the month. And the answer is why? Who has an answer? Nobody's volunteering. I'll tell you the answer. Okay.
Because everybody else does it those days.
Exactly, Kelly. Everybody's trying to close at the end of the month. Back in the old days, and again, I refer to that because I am old and been doing this a long time. Everybody used to try to close on the last day of the month because it saved prepaid interest. Well, you're going to have to pay it one way or another. Okay. You pay prepaid interest to the end of the a month, and then you skip the next month payment because you're paying in arrears, and you start your first payment the following month. And so that's why they did that. So you could save a few bucks for the purchaser by closing at the end of the month. Okay. End of the month, everybody, and I mean everybody, is trying to scramble to get things done. And so mistakes are made. There are delays. And so if you push back because of a delay of some sort, because you have your closing date at the end of the month and it moves into the next month, then it may cost your purchaser more money, because now instead of a few days prepaid interest, they have a whole month. Or it may be a real problem for the seller because they have an FHA mortgage. And if FHA mortgages aren't paid off by the end of the month, then they owe a full month interest, regardless of the day of the following month that it's going to close on. So that's important. So I wrote a couple of contracts yesterday, and I have the closing date is, I always like to try to close on, the 25th, 26th, somewhere around there, and give at least 3 days, preferably about 5 days, in order to account for any last minute delays through underwriting, title issues, anything that could come up that would cause a problem. Okay. Questions or comments regarding how you handle closing? Okay. Number 16 is possession. Okay. This is kind of my rule for an occupied house, whether I am the listing agent or the selling agent. I always put down 3 days, closing plus 3 days at noon. That's my terminology. Closing plus 3 days at noon. You don't want to put out a date necessarily, because that date may change. So I put closing plus 3 days at noon. And the reason I do that is you don't want to have your seller have a cleaned out house, everything sitting on a moving van, and the purchasers get struck by lightning on the way to the closing. It's happened. Okay. You want to account for delays. And if something, the worst case scenario happened and this thing isn't gonna close, they have stuff in boxes, but they hadn't moved them out. Okay, give them some time to do that. In other words, if you are writing an offer, I always ask. Again, you ask questions, get with that listing agent. You want that listing agent to be your friend, your buddy, and help make this deal work. So I call the listing agent and say, you know, I'm writing an offer, ideally for your sellers. When would it be best for them to close, and how much time are they going to need to be able to give possession? Okay, and then work it out from there. I've had, and I have some people on this call right now have told me what made or break a deal for them was that very thing, giving this seller time in order to be able to make necessary arrangements for them to move. Okay. Questions about 16. Okay. 17. Sometime there's a difficulty involved in this. A lot of times the listing agent wants to take control and use who they want to. And that's not their call. By law, the purchaser, regardless of who's paying closing costs and how much, have the right to use the settlement agency or closing attorney. Now, here, I've got rules about everything. Those of you that know me a little bit have already figured that out. And one of my rules is I am not going to let a closing take place on someone that is an attorney or closing attorney that dabbles in real estate closings. You want to get a closing attorney that's all they do. If I'm checking in for brain surgery, I don't want a doctor to operate on my brain that does it every now and again, but mostly he does kidney work. Okay, you see where I'm going with there. Everybody has a friend that's attorney. Oh, I got an uncle and so forth. And the answer is no, we aren't going to do that. I have gone in the past and sat at a closing that was supposed to start at 2 and it didn't get into 4 because the attorney was at a divorce trial and in court and couldn't get back to the closing. So you see where I'm going. People that are doing other things end up having delays. You want to go with a company. And there are good closing companies that have been in business for a long time. If you want any suggestions, I'll be glad to recommend them. But there's some good ones out there. There's some I prefer to work with because they know me better than other people. And you want to work with people that consider you a friend and a professional associate that are going to put you and your customers on top of the list. So pick it. And, you know, I recommend, based on whether it's in Montgomery, Elmore County, or Prattville, or whatever, I recommend to the purchaser, we're closing in this. My recommendation for a really good closing attorney that's going to take care of you and represent you well is so-and-so. And if they have no problem, then that's who we put in this blank right here. I'm not one of those that leaves it up to the purchaser, the seller, or whatever, and give them 5 choices and let them go out. I want to get somebody that's really good, that's going to take care of my people in their best interest and do an outstanding job. Okay, questions? Okay, number 18. This is regarding the warranty. If we're asking the seller to pay for warranty, we'll check here and check here that we're asking for the seller. If the buyer says they'll buy it, you'll check here. But this blank right here, I want to put the warranty and how much the seller will pay. So for instance, right here, I would put Old Republic up to $600, or American Home Shield up to. You want to have that up to in there, an amount that the seller is going to agree to pay toward that warranty. Because again, sometimes that may change. The purchaser might want to say, okay, I want to, septic coverage in there. Well, they may have to go and pay that extra $150 themselves. So you want to have who the company is and up to. Now, I always like to handle that. I don't want the agent on the other end, and sometimes they just get busy and they start putting somebody in, and that may not necessarily be the home warranty company that I like or familiar with. Again, I like working with people who I know and know me, the home warranty company representatives that go around. And so I want to do that. And you let the agent, when you get in a contract agreement done, if I'm the listing agent, I'll tell the other agent, okay, it looks like your people want American Home Shield, just making sure that you're going to be the one that orders that, or would you like me to do that for you? You can always tell them that way. Okay, we're moving on along. Questions? Okay, again here, most financed properties are going to want a termite inspection. I won't let a property close at all unless it is an as-is, fall down, rehab home that's going to be torn up anyway. Will not let that happen without a termite inspection. Real opportunity for a lawsuit to sell a house and a month later because there wasn't a termite inspection. Then find out that the house is eaten up with termites. That's a very little expense in the scheme of things to get things correct. Okay. Surveys.
Donna, I got a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, either you or the customer, put in a order for the home inspection. So if we, how do we do that?
For a home inspection?
No, not for the warranty. The warranty. I'm sorry.
Okay. You need to go and there's really a couple. I use Old Republic a lot because I've known the representatives for a good long time, and I like dealing with somebody. When I have a customer call me and say I'm having a problem, my plumbing went out and I can't get people and so forth, I like being able to call and say, I have a customer that has some problems and needs some help. Would you please handle this personally? Okay. If you're just picking stuff out of the, blue, you may have those type problems. So you pick the warranty company that you think best represents what you need to do for your buyer. Okay. Okay. Again, back in the day, every financed property had to have a survey, every single one. It was ridiculous. And then the mortgage companies said, most of this stuff is platted and recorded at the courthouse and has pins in the ground. And unless there's something that would be considered an encroachment, there's not necessarily a survey needs to be done. Now, I rarely recommend a survey if it is a cookie cutter type neighborhood. If you're selling something in Wind Lakes or Sturbridge or, someplace like that, Emerald Mountain, it's all been master platted and has had surveys previously. If you have acreage, I pretty much always recommend we have a survey or we have a copy of a survey that shows what you're buying. You got 50 acres, and 10 years ago, the grandpa gave 2 acres in the lower 40 to cousin Ralph, then we have a problem. We need to make sure that the legal description and survey match. So kind of a rule of thumb, if you are in a platted, existed master plat neighborhood, you're probably pretty good unless you see something that's sitting right on the property line that may be an encroachment. But other than that, when you're doing acreage, it's always a good idea. you know, a existing survey is really fine. You know, if things haven't changed, particularly land, you aren't going to change anything on it. But if they don't have an existing survey, I would certainly recommend you need to provide a new survey form. Okay, questions about survey?
I actually did have a question. Before that, it was still about the warranty, but I'm driving. I couldn't get to my unmute button. But anyway, so if we call, say, a representative for the warranty company or whatnot, like, how do they get paid? They know that they're getting paid after closing, or
Sweetie, you go online. I don't ever talk to somebody at a warranty company. I go online and I click in that I'm doing a new warranty. It's got a fill in the blank, very easy to follow on what you're doing. And then you just hit submit, and it's going to send an email to the attorney's office. It's going to send an email to you. It's going to send one to the buyer. It's going to send one to the listing agent, which is an invoice and all the information regarding the property and how much, and the attorney pays for that. Okay, that's part of what happens at closing. It's nothing that happens in advance. Okay, all right.
Hey, Don, on the survey, are you
Yes.
recommending that if we, I know that the contract you're going over is on the purchaser side, but if we list the home, are you recommending we should always have a survey in hand, be able to have one available no matter where it's located?
That's a question that you always ask, Kelly. Just say, do you have a survey?
And if they don't?
And if they don't, and it's acreage and so forth, they probably should be able to get a copy from whoever closed it previously. Okay. If they don't, you need to tell them you may end up being asked to provide a copy of a survey to show the property that they're buying. Okay. So just
what about the platted, like you said, in neighborhoods or whatnot?
I use that a lot. I pull up Realist and I click on the property that populates the red lines around it with the dimensions and so forth. And I tell them, this is not a survey. It's not exact, but it's real close. And it gives you what is showing in the tax records is where the property lines are supposed to lay and the dimensions. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
I've used that on a lot of occasions. Don't use that on when acreage is involved. Acreage, you end up without a survey. You don't know if there's easements. I mean, you wouldn't believe the kind of situations that we run into in Elmore County regularly because of the way property has been sold, and some of it's been given to family members and some of it's been used by the next door neighbor for the last 30 years, but actually is on your property, that type of thing. So that's why you need to get surveys when acreage is involved. Okay. Okay, number 11. This is one that I usually have a gripe with. Okay. And let me go to this. Okay. This is the way that the additional terms in page 2, item 11 should look. Again, gripes that I have is when you start writing things in and it's just one long sentence that deals with several different things. They need to be separated. They need to be numbered so that when you're talking about something with an agent, a customer, an attorney, you can say, okay, page 2, item 11, number 2. Okay, this is what we're dealing with. You're not going to try to get them to sort it out. So make it nice, neat, sequential. The program within that field actually will start shrinking the print where you can get lots and lots of stuff in there. You wouldn't believe how much stuff you can get in here. But these are the things that I've been doing for thousands of years, is verbiage that automatically goes in there. The first thing I'm going to put in there is that this sale is contingent upon a professional home inspection acceptable to the purchaser. That basically is telling my purchaser if you have a home inspection and you don't like anything, this is your out. You just can pull and be done with it, okay? So that is in there. The next thing I always do is address what is already in the contract, but you're making it clear by identifying it so it's not skipped over. This is the place where we're saying, these are the items that the purchaser is requesting to remain. Okay. And I always put all fixtures, window treatments, ceiling fans, built-in appliances, and I basically stop there because those are standard. Roof, flooring, things like that are remain, but fixtures are dealing with, you know, everything that's attached to the house, chandeliers, you know, lights, all of light switches, all of those things. Window treatments is everything that's on the window. Drapes, curtain rods, mini blinds, all of those things, that is a window treatment. In some occasions, you're going to have to, and again, you can find out in advance by asking the listing agent. We're going to ask for all the listing window treatments. Is there anything that the seller can't part with? Well, the master bedroom window treatments match the bed linen and so forth, and so they don't remain. And so you can put that in there. Master bedroom draperies do not remain. But you're going to ask for those things that you want. Other things beyond the built-in appliances that remain a lot are your refrigerator, washer, dryer, pool equipment. Sale yesterday, I'm listing the gas logs in the fireplace and the TV that the sellers have obviously left that's above the fireplace. This verbiage is usually required by the mortgage company, because if you list all of these things and you don't put this in there, then that would make it part of the loan, which they don't want to happen. These things, most of the time, end up being considered personal property. So you need to put to remain at no value. Okay, does everybody understand that and why? Now you can put anything. I've had stuff, a long list of stuff. I've had a $500,000 deal way in the balance at one time over whether the trampoline stayed or not, believe it or not. So I ended up buying a trampoline because it was my listing and my sale to make that work. Okay. And this is just a, for instance, I always put in here to verify that the has been, we want a letter from the mortgage company to accompany this. But I always put they've been qualified through who and who the loan officer is. Okay. And then you can add lots and lots of stuff here, but number it, identify, and that'll help you. Questions? Okay. Okay. That was item 11. Going down to additional terms. We already put in item 11 and subject to a home inspection, but this has to do with the number of days. It's saying, how many days are you giving with respect from when the contract's accepted? How many calendar days do I have to have an inspection done? So you're going to put a number in here. And I usually put probably 10 to 15 these days. Sometimes they run behind because there's so many out there. Okay. Coming further down, all of this is in regard to the home inspection, who's doing what, when, how many days, and so forth. Number 21 is a number, usually 48 to 72 hours that you're going to put in here. That what this is saying is, I'm going to have a home inspection. If I have home inspection and there are items that I want remedied by the seller, I'm going to present in writing to the seller a list of these items and ask them to be addressed, and you ask them to be addressed by money or by repair and so forth. Now, the way to do this is if you've got a purchaser that wants things fixed, send the complete home inspection that you got from the home inspector to the listing agent with permission from the purchaser. You need to tell the purchaser, now I need to send this so that they can address these and see what they're doing. So you're going to send the inspection, then send a separate list. And the way to do this is you say, page 2, item 11, I'm going back to the contract, and what you're sending is, these are the items the purchaser would like remedied by the seller, and then list them and put the page and the item, because everything is listed that way on a home inspection. That way they can look at pictures and what the inspector saw and what needs to be done, and it cuts down on confusion. Okay. Questions about that? Okay. Now we'll try to zip through faster because we're coming up on an hour here shortly. Final walkthrough inspection, number 2. What that means is that the purchaser has the right prior to closing to walk through the property and make sure it's in the condition that they bought it. Make sure nothing's been torn up, holes in the wall, and things like that. Financial contingency. Number 22, it means that the buyer doesn't have any additional financial contingencies other than what is listed and what is required by the mortgage company and so forth. It gives a number of days and that they will provide from the mortgage company evidence that they've been pre-qualified and are approved to move forward toward the closing of the property. Is what number 3 is. Wood infestation report just deals with the termite report. The seller being able to remedy the problems and so forth. It's just how to address if we're having a wood infestation report and that there's issues involved in the report. Okay. Always remember when you're listing the property to ask the question, do you have a bond on this property? Okay, because that's the company that you want to deal with when you're getting a termite inspection, is the one that is holding the bond on it. Contingency.
bonds transferable?
Yes, they are. And that's why you want to make sure in termite companies, you know, they want that. They want to continue that bond fee that they're getting each year for the termite. Contingencies right here, it's just saying that there's the property will remain on the market until any other contingencies are removed and so forth. So sometimes you can have contingencies on anything. Contingencies on financing, home inspection, contingencies on being able to get a job in this city. You know, if you're coming in interviewing for a job, making sure that you get that. Contingency on approval of a third party. A lot of times a husband will come in town being transferred, find a house, and then want it contingent upon the wife being able to come in and take a look at it. So a lot of different types of contingencies that can come available. Okay. Number 6, where it deals with appraisals, VA loans, conventional loans. All this section is saying is if it's a financed property that it identifies the value and is not guaranteeing the condition of the property. That's all this stuff is saying. Right here is a blank that in recent time, the mortgage companies have asked us to put in. It really doesn't matter because all of them require the parties to sign an amendatory clause. And what amendatory clause is saying is that in this finance sale, the sales price cannot, when the appraisal is done, if the appraisal amount is less than the sales price, then everything's at a stop. It's at a renegotiation point. it's also saying is if you got $200,000 sale and it comes in at 195, that it does not require the purchaser to buy it at a lesser price. It does not require the seller to sell it at that lesser price. It's a renegotiation point where both parties have to agree, sign off an initial, any new price or changes to it. But it's basically saying the mortgage company is not going to finance more than what that appraisal is going to be. Okay, questions regarding number 6. And this blank right here is where you put in the number. And a number should always match what the sales price is. If you got a $200,000 sale, then you should have $200,000 in here. Okay. Okay, real estate certification. What this means is that everybody's telling the truth, that there's no sneaky deals or lying going on regarding financing, jobs, salaries, all of that stuff, that everything that is being done to everyone's best knowledge is true and as accurate as can be. Okay. Disclaimers by licensees and sellers. I always talk about these two together. And what this means is that this is a caveat emptor state, which means buyer beware. And it basically means do not rely as a purchaser on the information that is given to you by a real estate licensee or a seller to be true and accurate. If there are important items to the purchaser, they have to discover those themselves. They are the ones ultimately responsible. Now, I always give an example so it's not confusing. Some of the examples I give to the purchaser when explaining this is, okay, right here, it says that this is a, Prattville school district, and it's important for the purchaser because they have kids and they want them in that school. Okay. And if it's inaccurate, if it was done by mistake, intentional or whatever, it doesn't matter. That purchaser could have picked up the phone, called the transportation department for the schools, given the address, and they can tell you exactly what school that is in for elementary, middle school, and high school. So that is an example. Don't rely on that seller that says, hey, that roof is in great shape. Okay, it may look that way, but that's why we get a home inspection. We want to get a professional to answer questions important to the purchaser. It is not our job. Don't rely on what I say. Don't rely on the seller. It doesn't mean I'm being evasive. It means I want you to get the proper people to give you answers that you need for this purchase. Questions about 7 and 8? Okay, we've already addressed fixtures. Fixtures in page 2, item 11, where we say all fixtures, ceiling fans, window treatments, built-in appliances, and so forth remain. This is what this talks about. It goes a little bit further. Okay. Proration. Proration, explain to the sellers and purchasers that when the deal is done, the seller pays all that they are responsible for: house payments, taxes, homeowners association fees, all of those. They pay their portion all the way up to the day of closing, and that from that point on, the purchaser is responsible. Okay. All right. Title and deed. Sometimes if you're buying a foreclosure or a particular type home, it may have something other than what is standard, and that is called a general warranty deed. A general warranty deed means that there's no liens or encumbrances on the property. That's how you explain it to them. And tell them in layman's terms, it's the responsibility of the attorney's office to do the research on the property to make sure they're getting clear title. that they're getting it free and clear with no liens, no mechanics liens or anything like that. And so they can understand that by getting a general warranty deed. Number 12, we've already talked about the survey, and some instances you need it, some you don't. Okay. Risk of loss. The seller is supposed to keep insurance on their property, to return the property to a condition if it's for some reason damaged in a fire. We here in the past week had a situation where the house that was being purchased burned completely down. And the seller's supposed to keep insurance to return that property to the condition it was when the purchaser made the offer on it, whether it's by storm, fire, water damage or whatever. And so that's a situation that's a renegotiation and a deal, but it's just saying, hey, if I still want to buy this house, you're supposed to have insurance to make me whole. Okay. Earnest money. This is the way I explain it to the purchaser. When you write this earnest money check, you're writing it to the listing company. That money is your money. It's nothing extra. It is applied toward the amount of money owed by you at closing. If you're writing a $500 earnest money check and you owe $1,000 at closing, this is $500 that's attributed toward the contributions toward it. Now, the other thing I tell them, very important. This earnest money is not the extent of your responsibility in this deal if we get it accepted. If we get it accepted and you have buyer's remorse and in the middle of the night decide you don't want to buy this house and just say, keep my earnest money, I'm backing out, that may well be something that could happen. But what could also be happening is that the seller said, no, this has been a tough process for me. I sold you this house in good faith. I'm going to show up at closing. I expect you to show up in closing and buy my house. Okay. A seller can sue a purchaser for specific performance to make them buy that house. Okay. In my entire career, I've seen it go all the way and go to a suit for specific performance 3 times, and every time it worked. Okay. 2 times where a seller made a purchaser buy, and 1 time where 2 times where a seller made a purchaser buy, and 1 time where a purchaser made a seller sale. Now it works, and I tell them this is a double-edged sword. It works 2 ways. If in the middle of the night that seller wakes up and says, hey, you know what, I didn't sell this house for enough money and I'm backing out, then you can say, I bought this house in good faith. I'm going to show up at the attorney's office to buy your house. I expect you to sell it to me. Now, the reality of it, when a fight occurs, most of the time, the seller and the purchaser just back off because a suit for specific, easy for you to say, specific performance could last a long time, a year or more before it went to court and was settled. So most people just say, it ain't worth it. I'm just backing out. Okay. Questions regarding earnest money? Okay, let me zip through the rest of this as much as possible. Okay, defaults and legal remedies and controversies and claims. All this is saying is that if we get a contract agreed upon all the way up to closing, if everybody wants to go get Alexander Shinar and sue everybody, they can. Okay, but once we close this controversy claims here in disputes, once it closes, it's saying that after that happens, if we can't settle a problem that might come up over a conference table, then what we're going to do is agree to binding arbitration, which means we're going to get an arbitrator to go over the deal and make a decision, and everybody's going to stand by it. Okay? Questions?
Can I ask you a question?
Okay.
Going back a little bit. So if there's an appraisal on the house and it's lower than the selling price, you don't have to redo and say the buyers say the seller will go down on the price because the appraisal value is a little bit lower.
Mhm.
You don't have to totally do a new contract. You're
No,
saying you can
no,
modify-
page one, if you got $200,000 and the appraisal was 95 and the seller and the purchaser said, you know, seller, I can't sell it any more than 195. And the purchaser says, I'm excited, I get to buy what I would have paid 200,000 for 195. All you do is on page one, scratch through $200,000 and put in 195, get both parties to initial, and you're done.
Okay, thank you.
That's all you got to do.
Thank you.
Okay, RESPA Act. What this means, this is a federal guideline. In a lot of states, real estate agents are allowed to get additional monies for bird dog fees. Okay, you use a particular inspection company, mortgage company, or whether, and they get paid. We are not allowed to do that in Alabama. We are allowed to only be paid by our commissions, but we have to divulge that's we're paid by commissions only and not receive any other kind of money. Okay, so that's what this means here. Okay, all right, no third-party beneficiary. Real simple. If something happens to one of the parties that are principals, the signers on the contract, if something happens before it closes, it's not inheritable by another person. You got to start over. So you got a husband and wife buying a property and one of them passes away, then you got to start over. It's not inheritable by a child or someone like that. Oral statements not binding. Really simple. If it didn't happen in writing, it didn't happen. In the state of Alabama, there's no binding contracts that are oral. It has to be in writing. So if off the top of the head, sellers talking to the purchaser while they're looking at the property and say, hey, I throw in that riding lawnmower, you better have it in the contract, because if it's not enforceable. Okay. Okay. Number 19 sometimes is confusion. It basically says that if some part of this contract goes against a city ordinance, a law, or something of that nature, if there's something in the contract that accomplishes that, then the contract is void. You can't have something that is against the law. Okay. Selection of attorney, we've already talked about that. The purchaser has the right to use the attorney they want. Time is of the essence. This is something back in the olden days that we didn't use very much, but it's used. I personally used it quite frequently recently to force sellers into a timely decision instead of waiting around for several days to see how many offers they're going to get and then make a decision all at once. Try to force them to make a decision on my offer right then or lose it. And so if there is a time situation, you need to address it in the contract with very simple language saying this contract expires at September the 24th at 5 p.m. unless the seller responds. So that's what time of the essence is. It has timeline limitation. Number 22, electronic transactions. That's all we do these days when we're using Authentisign. You know, faxes. We get a fax come in from some vendor now and again selling extended warranties and so forth, but I can't even remember the last time a person actually used a fax. They're using email and so forth. But all that's saying is that an electronic conveyance of documents is just as good as an original. So if you're emailed a document or fax a document or something of that nature, it's just as good as an original. With using Authentisign, you can print out, it has a whole page of numbers and digits and stuff that is a electronic ID verifying that is an actual signature. Lead-based paint disclosure, if you have anything that was built prior to 1978, you're going to have one of these. That is a federal guideline, and the reason is that flaking paint and stuff used to be fairly prevalent, but you just don't even see it anymore. It's been cleaned up, painted over, and fixed. But flaking paint with the lead-based paint, they were concerned, and of course, obviously it happened. Small children would get that paint and eat it, and lead does not dissipate from the body, and it ends up killing you at some point. Okay. Number 24, it has listed in this blank who the listing company is and who the selling company is. Real easy. Our company policy is that we will represent the purchaser as a buyer's agent unless the property they're buying is one of our own company listings. And in that case, we would have to act as a limited consensual dual agency. And the same thing with the seller. You're basically checking the block of which it applies. Okay. You don't act as a transaction broker ever unless special occasions where you talk to your broker and get permission to do that. That is something you don't need to get involved in. We act as a buyer, a seller, and a disclosed dual agent and transaction brokers only in special situations. Okay. This here is the signature page and the places and time stamps and date stamps. We have the name and the signature spot for buyers, sellers, listing agents, and selling agents. Okay. Questions? We are done. Okay. As I said, I'll be glad to send this to you, the numbered contract, and send you a step-by-step explanation of each number. I will send that to you. Just email me at don@donbrewer.com and say, Don, would you please send me copies of the training that you did today, and I'll be glad to send it to you.
Don, question.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Can we, or should we, when we're listing a house, require the buyers to use this contract as opposed to something they may have with their agent?
Here's the deal, and that's always a push comes to shove, and I'm kind of a horse's rear end when it comes to a lot of things, just because I've done it a long way. Ron will verify that I fit the bill. When you are representing somebody, you don't want to change what you know and what you know to work well to suit someone else. The only time I will use a different contract is when I'm going in to Ron and Terry and I'm writing a contract, which they'll do. Ron and Terry will take care of that for you. All these builders have their own contract. It's something they're used to. New construction is a totally different thing. There's different applications to it, different timeframes and money involved and so forth. And so certainly they need to do that because they are a company building a home. Okay. That's the only time. Some of these companies, C21 over in Prattville, they're one that says you got to use your contract. I don't represent C21 and what's in the best interest of C21. I write on my contract, and if they make a fuss about it, which they don't, I tell them, you get signatures on this contract that they're from your seller that they're turning it down because it's written on an MLS contract. They aren't going to do that. C21 is making the decision for the seller. Okay, the seller's not making that decision that they want to use that contract. So use our contract. Don't let somebody else talk you into using another one unless it's a builder. That's something that's reasonable and needs to be done because it facilitates other actions beyond what we do and just buying an already established home.
Donna, the reason for that is, you know, we've represented probably 25, 30 different builders out here.
Exactly.
Each one of them have a different experience over the life of their building process, and they've been stung a few times. And so it's interesting, like Louder has a 12-page contract, and some of the other builders might have only a 2-page contract. So it's up to them to decide what risks they want to take and what they want to put in their contracts to avoid any type of issues they might have with the construction portion of the house. So that's the reason why we just let them do whatever they want to. We have a generic Sturbridge contract here that all the builders can use, and it's been tested over time. But a lot of them, just like they'll fill out that, and they'll also have an addendum which they'll have their own contract, so that some of their stuff appears in a contract, so we combine them all together. So that's the way we work new homes.
Yeah, exactly. Every single builder has their own policies regarding callbacks and repairs and, you know, all kind of things. They all are different. And so that's why they do that. But any other time, use our MLS contract that we are used to. Don't let somebody say you can only use our contract, because that's not the rule. We represent the buyer. We don't represent what someone else wants.
So Don, when I'm listing this property that's coming up, could I require in the MLS, the contract I want you to use is such and such?
No, because you're doing exactly what I'm telling I wouldn't do if I was another agent. You know, the other agent has the right to do whatever they want to when they're writing an offer.
Okay, that's what I was referring
Yeah,
to.
they, you know, the decision from the seller is, do you want to go forward and do this offer, or do you want to require it using one of our standard MLS offers? Now, just recently, I had an agent come to me because they were going, Don, I didn't know this. I had to go through everything. It was so confusing and so complicated. And I said, simple, require them to use our contract. Or better yet, take the information from their contract, you put it on our contract, send it back to the agent that wrote it and said, my people will sign this, but they're not going to use your contract. They're uncomfortable.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Appreciate y'all being here.
I have nothing in writing, Ron, just an email.
Absolutely. Any questions? Y'all have a great weekend. Let me know what I can do to help you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.